Thank you, Virginia. Inspiring words. I know it's late, and if you'll bear with me, just want to bring things to a close. We've talked tonight about courage. Virginia's given us a graphic example in her own life of what God can do through people who have courage and who trust in Him. Our friends that Dan Patrick has been a courageous man. Ken Paxton has been falsely sued and denigrated and has refused to bow to those who would destroy his life. And we've been talking tonight about culture. Jeremy reminded us that we are in a culture war. I suspect that many of you, as I have watched the horrific Kavanaugh hearings in the last few weeks, hearings that gave a whole new meaning to the politics of personal destruction. People who were willing to tell unsubstantiated stories for political purposes to destroy a man's reputation, his career, and his life. Perhaps you've seen the video of Senator Ted Cruz and his wife being accosted in a public restaurant by a mob intent on intimidating. Today, people in our culture think being courageous is making some kind of controversial comment on social media or getting in the face of someone. We live in a culture where we can't agree on when life begins or what marriage is or gender. And we used to all agree that we should have the freedom to speak and defend the right of people to have that speech, but not today. So courage is what we've heard about tonight, and I have to tell you, I think back to from these uncertain days that we live today to the 1980s. My wife and I started homeschooling in the 1980s. That's what Dad always say, we homeschool. But we all know that Mom does the heavy lifting. But in the 1980s, I tell people that it was Democrat Attorney General Jim Maddox who got me involved in politics. Jim Maddox said he didn't believe parents were qualified to raise their children, much less teach them at home. And the state of Texas was prosecuting families simply for teaching their own children at home. And many of us in those days realized that if we didn't get involved in the political process, that people like Jim Maddox would be making decisions for us about what we could or could not do with our children. So we got involved in politics. We fought a legal battle for almost 10 years in the courts. And ultimately, in fact, in those days, Virginia, it was homeschoolers were underground. We were afraid to tell people publicly that we were homeschooling. We kept our kids inside until after school was let out because it was the full power of the state of Texas that was against us. Ultimately, as a result of that lengthy battle, we won the right to homeschool. And I used to think in my younger and naive days that we had won that battle. We could forget politics. We could forget the legislative process and the campaigns. And finally, I'm slow, but I'm not stupid. Finally, I realized that we live in a culture that not only is opposed to life and free speech, but our culture is opposed to the fundamental God-given right of parents to raise their children and educate them as they see fit. And this year I have been blogging and writing about a new attack against homeschooling that has started from California and Hawaii to Kentucky and Maryland, in which there is a new approach to arguing that parents should not be free to teach their kids at home. And we saw that come to Texas in April when a horrific incident in Austin launched a long news story in the Houston Chronicle and the San Antonio Express News, and later the San Antonio newspapers and others in Texas sounded the call for the Texas legislature to restrict the freedom of parents to teach their kids at home. We saw an organization say that there's not a state in the country that has adequate regulation. What would they recommend? They would recommend registration, annual testing, academic testing, an annual doctor's examination of the children. And all of these people, of course, would be mandatorily required to report any concerns, quote unquote, to officials. That sounds like a CPS investigation. So here's the great thing about the country we still live in. How many of you remember the approaching election of 2016? You know, and I remember my Christian friends coming to me and said, Tim, what are you going to do? What are our choices? We didn't like, I won't speak for you, I didn't like them. But what I said was, you know, I'm not sure what Donald Trump is going to do. But I'm very sure what she is going to do. And so I said, I'm going to vote for him, and I'm going to pray that God will have mercy on our country. And frankly, I don't know what that looks like. But I can say today that he did have mercy on us as a country. One of the things that Dan and Ken have referred to is the homeschool community has become an activist community. If homeschoolers in Texas vote in the Republican primary, we can make up to 20% of the Republican primary voter turnout. And we have become a key part of the coalition to elect people. And so what we've heard tonight from Virginia and Dan and Ken is that we need to vote in this upcoming election. And I would say, to add to their voices, let me unabashedly say we should vote a straight Republican ticket because our future of our country is at risk. So how do we change our culture? Well, you know, at the Texas Homeschool Coalition, we are changing our culture one family at a time. We fielded 13,000 phone calls, emails, and inquiries about homeschooling last year. We did 630 conferences with special needs families who wanted to teach their kids at home. So the wonderful thing about homeschooling is we have the opportunity to impact our culture, not just because of our political activity, but because we can impact our families and raise up a godly generation. So 3% of the kids in the United States homeschool today. I would submit to you that we are having an impact far, far, far beyond our numbers. I always like to quote that verse that God delights to use the small and foolish things of the world to confound the wise. And that is certainly true of homeschooling. So this evening, my friend Judge Schmoody from Houston shared with me a story of a Democratic judge in Harris County who, in a custody case, reversed a decision and reversed custody of a child because, and put this in the record, that the decision was because the mom was homeschooling. Now, at the Texas Homeschool Coalition, we have a special place for judges like that. It's called the Texas Judicial Wall of Shame. And we post those on our website. I've had my attorney friends say, you know, Tim, attorneys can't do that. And I said, that's okay, I'm not an attorney. And we're going to publicize those folks. And that is exactly why we vet candidates. And we spend a lot of time to make sure that these candidates understand our position, especially judicial candidates. And we work to elect legislative officials and statewide officials. And let me just say that, I made a lifetime commitment to my wife. I don't make lifetime commitments to elected officials. So the bottom line is, as Virginia said, that God had called her to be an attorney and called her and equipped her to defend Christian families in communist Romania. God has called us at the Texas Homeschool Coalition to defend not just homeschooling, but the fundamental God-given right of families and parents to direct the care, control, and upbringing of their children. So tonight, I'm going to ask you if you would stand with us. Each of you has an envelope. Would y'all pick up these envelopes in the middle of the table and pass those around? And I hope you will fill those cards out and that you will, I'm asking you tonight unabashedly, assertively, pleadingly, prayerfully, that you will make the most generous contribution you can tonight to help us at the Texas Homeschool Coalition. This has been a difficult year for us. We've lost some supporters this year because of some of our political endorsements. And we make no apologies for that. We decided a long time ago that we would endorse the people that we believe God wanted us to endorse. And if others disagreed with that, then so be it. So if you'll look at this card, there are 3 organizations that you can make your check out to or credit card endorsement. The first is our 501c3, Texas Homeschool Coalition, Inc. That is our nonprofit, our tax-exempt. If you need a tax-exempt donation tonight, make a contribution to the Texas Homeschool Coalition, Inc. That organization enables us to field 13,000 phone calls, emails, etc., inquiries a year. It enables us to educate the public about homeschooling. We received, our website last year, we received 300,000 unique visitors. Secondly, our 501c4 organization is the Texas Homeschool Association. That's an advocacy organization. That is the organization by which we lobby out of. We intervened for 20 families last year in CPS investigations. We litigate out of that. In fact, we currently have a case before the Third Court of Appeals in which we've sued the Texas Ethics Commission because of their attempt through rulemaking to intimidate and chill the speech of conservative voters across the state of Texas. We wrote 120, we used to call them ministry letters. We minister to CPS workers and superintendents and other people who either don't know the law or refuse to abide by it, but we're more professional now. We call those intervention letters. 120 of those last year. And we intervene on behalf of homeschoolers and members of our association from anything from CPS investigations to college admissions, driver's license, or anything else. And finally, our political PAC, Texas Homeschool Coalition PAC, a key element of what we do is political. I mentioned just a few minutes ago, and only half joking, that we don't make long-term commitments to candidates. I said a long time ago that what we need in elected office is advocates. I'm looking for judges like Judge Schmoody, who will stand up for families and don't have to be chided or pressured into doing what the right thing to do is. We look for legislative candidates who will be advocates for us on the legislature. I had a candidate, an elected official one time. I had to call him and tell him we were going to endorse his opponent. And he said, "Tim, I don't understand. I have family that homeschool. We like homeschoolers. Did I vote against a bill?" And I said, "No, you're on a committee, in the jurisprudence committee in the Senate, And we asked you 3 times over a period of 2 years to help us with legislation, and you said you couldn't. And he said, well, Tim, I carried 100 bills last session. And I said, well, I rest my case. You just told me there were 100 other things that were more important to you than what was important to the families of Texas. I'm sometimes accused of being assertive and aggressive. And Rick Perry said to me one time, and I carry it as a badge of honor, that we are relentless in the protection of homeschool families. So I want to thank you tonight for coming. I hope you will take this, fill it out, make your most generous contribution that you can. In fact, my best request would that you would make a generous contribution to each of those 3 organizations. So thank you for being here. Thank you for your dedication to your own families. And thank you for the courage to stand with us against a culture and to change it one family at a time. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, that was awesome, Tim. Thank you. Tim's also been called some other things. I think pit bull's my favorite. I think he kind of likes that. We are about done. I'm going to ask Sarah Kingsbury, one of our amazing young homeschool winners, to come up, and she's going to do the closing prayer. And then I've got about 4 quick things before we call it a wrap. And you guys are welcome once we leave. Hang around. We've got the place till late, so you can stay around and talk to your friends, that kind of stuff. So, Sarah, go ahead.
If you would all bow with me, please. Dear Lord, we thank you for this blessed evening and the opportunity to come together and the freedom we have in this country to come together like this and further THSC's mission. And I pray that we will never forget the cost of our freedom and that we will never stop fighting for it. We have been beyond blessed to have Virginia Prodham with us tonight, and we thank you for the impact she's making. As each of us leave tonight, I pray that you would give us a spirit of courage, remembering that courage is not the absence of fear, but moving forward in spite of fear. The courage to further your mission here on this world. I pray this in Jesus' holy name. Amen.